Greetings, everyone. Welcome once again to the Oz and Crew podcast. I am Ozzy here once again with my buddy Mad Matt.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about The Matrix Reloaded, which I can understand why some people don't feel this way. It was actually my favorite movie in the series. How about you, Matt? How did you feel
Uh,
about the movie in particular?
there's some weird ham-fisty moments, but honestly, a good majority of it's still pretty decent, I feel.
But I will admit, it is the last good movie in the in the
Oh
series.
yeah, I remember being very let down by the next one, and I haven't seen the fourth one yet, but I hear it's terrible.
Oh, terrible doesn't begin to describe it, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. For right now, we're here to talk about The Matrix Reloaded, and I feel like there's actually a lot more memorable moments in this movie than the first one. I think most of the really memorable stuff of the first movie was kind of in like the last half hour with like
Yeah.
them storming the building to save Morpheus, and then the final showdown between Neo and Agent Smith. All that kind
hmm
of happened in like the last half hour of the movie.
I
The
mean, there's also little moments here and there, but that last half-hour chunk is just full of all kinds of memorable stuff. Yeah.
right, like the lobby scene, the scene with the helicopter and the chain gun, and all the crazy shit near the end of that. Whereas like most of the rest of the movie was world building before that.
hmm
And
And there's a tiny bit of world building still going on in this movie, but it's not nearly as like heavily stilted on
yeah,
that.
I mean, I think the biggest world building in this, aside from just expansion of the lore inside the Matrix itself, is we actually see Zion in this movie,
hmm
which we didn't see it in the previous movie. It was only implied to exist. We never actually saw it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this movie, I feel after like I mentioned this before, I actually saw all three of the movies relatively close together because I watched the first two on video like 2 weeks before the third movie came out.
Mhm.
And the second movie really gave me exactly what I wanted after having watched the first movie, where it's like we had all the world building in the first movie. Well, that's out of the way now. So now we can just focus on having insane fucking action for most of the movie, which is what we
Right.
get. We get
Oh
for
yeah.
most of the movie. Like most of the movie is just insane action scene after insane action scene with a little bit of story stuff in between to tie it all together.
hmm And
Uh,
I'll grant them that at least at the time that was some definitely like beyond normal expectation action sequencing going on.
well, yes,
Nobody had done anything like much like the first Matrix. No one had done some of these action sequences like this before, like ever.
and even just in general, and this is one of the few good things I can say about the third movie. All of the Matrix movies have good fight choreography.
Yeah.
They all do.
Yeah, even though I hate the third one and I can't remember exactly why, I just remember it falling apart before my eyes. But this action sequences were fun.
Yeah,
That was about it.
it's just that unfortunately the glue that was supposed to hold those together didn't hold them together.
Uh oh, I speaking of that, you know what? I can also say this. Any fans of Mad Max would be say the same thing about that third movie.
No, I haven't
Yeah.
really.
Oh, you haven't done the Mad Max movies?
No.
Oh, I need to get you on that
Well,
wagon
I'm,
train
I'm I'm sure we'll get to that eventually. It's like I got to get you to
eventually.
watch the Rocky movies, so
Oh yeah.
we'll we'll we'll,
Yeah,
we'll,
there's another one to add on to that list.
we'll each
Um,
introduce people to each other to movies we haven't seen before.
mhm.
Um,
I mean that's where my nickname comes from is those movies.
ah, I thought you
Yeah.
were I thought you were just an angry person named Matt.
No, 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 no. Actually, before I became a big Mad Max fan, I was a big Dune fan, and my first nickname was Muad'Dib.
I mean, if we're gonna go into that deep lore, I should mention my original username Ozzy came from Ozzy from Chrono Trigger,
hmm
not Ozzy Osbourne, which is what everybody assumed it to be, even though it's not spelled that way. But
Lo and behold, that was supposed to be a rocker reference, anyways. Whoops.
but yeah, and because this movie has crazy action one after the next in the movie we're
Hmm.
talking about now,
Back to the
getting
movie.
back
Yep.
on topic, um, I feel like there's actually a lot more movie moments you could call iconic in this
Hmm.
movie than there was in the first one. Uh,
Iconic moments and also memorable moments,
And granted,
hand in hand.
I'm not bashing the first movie. The first movie walked so this movie could run.
Yes.
And
Also very true of the Mad Max movies. The
but
first one walked so we could run on that second one. Holy smokes.
but even the opening scene in this was kind of iconic, which
Hmm.
ironically is a scene we end up seeing again later because it's us seeing the
In
future.
part, yeah.
Which we'll get to that later. I don't want to talk about that until we're talking about the ending because it is related to that. So the first moment that's actually present tense that happens in the movie is when they have that meeting and then the agents show up where they have the story explanation of why we don't have the actors for the original agents back, which is, well, they upgraded them. They replaced
Yep.
the old agents, so it's the new agents.
New agents. Don't scratch your head too hard on it. They've been upgraded, and basically the previous ones have been either recycled or deleted.
Theoretically it makes sense because the old agents were absolutely no match for Neo whatsoever.
At that point anymore, yeah.
So they had to do something. Even if these ones still aren't really strong enough to beat him, they can at least last against him a little bit.
They can at least put them on for
They,
a few seconds.
they more or less have about as much chance against Neo as most people actually had against an agent before.
Basically, yeah.
It's like, theoretically, one of them could get lucky. Not likely to happen, but it could happen.
I mean, they get their chance to get lucky with against the Ancients a couple times in that first movie if you're watching close enough, with the minigun scene in particular.
The minigun scene and Trinity shooting the one point blank in the head. It's like,
But it had no chance to dodge. Yep.
yeah. But this scene was kind of short lived, and around and right before the actual agents show up, they hint at Smith coming back because they don't show his face, but you fucking know it's him because you can tell by the silhouette in his voice that it's him.
Yeah, you can
Where
tell it's him, and then they leave him an earpiece.
yeah, leaves his old earpiece for Neo in an envelope, which then prompts Neo to realize agents are here.
Hmm.
But after that, we go to Zion, which I thought some of the stuff that happened at Zion was interesting, showing the place, having
Yeah, actually showing the place,
that,
showing how they defend
yeah,
themselves, etc.
the scene they eventually have with the one counselor talking with Neo, where they're hanging out in like the engineering room. But my least favorite scene in this movie is just the fucking Zion party.
The pointless party slash sex scene. Yeah.
And now I can understand if they had this for like Morpheus's speech was great. I'm not gonna discount that.
Yeah.
His whole speech about how they have to keep hope even though they know the machines are coming for them. But the actual dancing and everything, just this movie is over
Unneeded padding.
this movie is over 2 hours, and if they had shortened this, they might have gotten it under 2 hours. Is what
Just
I'm gonna
barely.
say,
Hmm.
because it was the most pointless scene in the movie. And I understand this; they wanted to have their techno beat music while people dance, and then I
Which also
remember,
doesn't make sense
yeah,
because they're fighting the machines and whatever, but they somehow have machine music. What?
and then well, yeah, and you remember when I pointed out when the one guy in slow
Oh,
motion does the hair
so
whip
much
and
in
the
the hair
water
flip.
goes
Yeah.
flying everywhere. I was like, you know, the stupid thing is that's the one thing I always remember about this scene. This is because just had to have this close up of this guy doing it. I don't think it was even a named character. I think it was just a random
No,
guy.
it's a random guy.
He just
It's a
swings
random guy
his
that
long
decided to
hair
do a
back,
close up on.
water goes flying everywhere in slow motion, and you're also just like, why was he soaked in water? That's not sweat. There's no way that's sweat.
Well,
People don't
apparently
sweat
there's
that
water
much.
all over in that cave somewhere. I don't know where it all came from, but a lot of people are sitting there with sheer wet clothing on too.
But aside from just thinking that has something. This movie does have one thing in common with the fourth movie, which we'll get to when we get to that. Is that it has a scene I felt went on for too long. Um, and since we're already talking about my least favorite scene in the movie, we might as well talk about the one other thing that has aged poorly about this movie is CGI Neo.
Oh,
You
hmm,
see multiple times throughout the movie when they're doing something that's a bit too over the top, like he's flying, or during the fight where he's fighting a bunch of Smiths and there's too much crap going on to actually have enough actors to do all that shit.
yeah.
It has that very uncanny valley thing where it's like it doesn't look terrible. It would have been considered good in a video game, but seeing it in the middle of a live action movie, it's like the minute you see it, you're like, that's not actually a person.
Yeah,
That's
nowadays you can see through it really easy. If you're watching it on, especially on a high definition screen and not a tiny CR, you can suddenly tell he went texturous and his clothes no longer have a feeling of real weight or actual fabric to them. They just suddenly went glossy, smooth, a
so.
bit of a matte finish.
So I gotta ask because we got a lot of crazy action scenes throughout the movie. We have, I mean, it's not as crazy, but the fight with Seraph was interesting. We got you got the scene where he's fighting the swarm of Smiths. Um, when he eventually fights the Merovingians goons, and then there's um, the whole car chase scene. What was your favorite action scene in the movie?
Honestly, I feel like the Smith fight and the highway fight were probably my top two, with the mobster group being like a very close second.
It's probably about how I feel. Like the
Yeah. It's not bad, it's just like not as action packed crazy as the Smith fight, and it's not as wild as the car chase scene with the Ghost Brothers.
yeah, makes sense. Um, and those are pretty much my favorites as well. Like, and they honestly both also both have like the best music in the movie.
Oh no. Which is also a thing that's been an internet thing for a while is memes of fights with that music
Well, yeah,
and other parodies and so forth with it.
you know, and Smith has so many like he's clearly fully transformed at this point. He's no longer remotely an agent anymore. He's actually developed an actual personality. Like there were little inklings of it in the first movie, but like he's making jokes now. Like
Me too.
yeah, I was thinking of having like the intro to this podcast be like, "We're back with the podcast with me," and then have you go and me
And me
too.
too.
But yeah, and
Best thing about me is there's so much of me.
I've got a list of topics that I want to talk about that I kind of have them written down in a way where we can also talk about this how the story progresses as we go through
Hmm.
them, um, because they're like the first movie had some things that were kind of allusions to things in real life. This movie does
Hmm.
as well a lot. Like when after Neo, you know, has a little sparring session with Seraph and then meets uh, the Oracle again, and Smith shows up, and
Hmm.
two main major themes kind of come up in this scene where Smith is talking about freedom and what really is free, and it's like it's the thing that I've heard people talk about a lot as regards to real life is like it's like we all say we're free, but can you at the same time can you really say you are? Because it's like you don't really have the freedom to just decide you don't want to do your job and quit your job because you'll starve, right?
Hmm.
They kind of worked that into what he was saying about freedom, and he also brought up purpose, as he was saying, what are you without purpose? And that's the thing that I feel really does guide a lot of people in real life, even if they don't actually think about it. Because, like, why do most people follow a religion or feel that they have to have a family or any of that stuff? Is a lot of people feel they have to have a reason to exist. And that's why Smith was
Mm.
obviously pissed off that he felt he didn't have one anymore after what happened with Neo in the first movie.
Yeah, because he's out of a job, but somehow he still
He
exists.
still exists, and he's like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do now? I'm free. Well, what does that mean? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, it was just an interesting concept, and it really does reflect a lot of things in real life about how people view the world. And it's, like I said, the first movie had a lot of little things about that too, or like you're being controlled by a system or whatever, which obviously would be alluding to like the government or people behind the scenes that we don't know about, like people that believe in the Illuminati and shit like that. I thought it was interesting that they brought up themes like that. Um,
Mm.
and then later on, uh, they introduced the Merovingian, where they refer to him as the Frenchman, the guy that's like the gang leader or the mob boss, whatever, however you want to view him.
Mm.
And he brings up the whole, well, you know what you want to do, but you don't know why you want to do it. It was an interesting thing, or he was they couldn't come up with an answer to what he was saying. Um, and with his goons, and this is something that brought up by the Oracle, is they kind of in in the movie they have a lore reason for why like real life conspiracies would exist,
Mm.
like
Yeah.
programs doing stuff they're not supposed to. Well, somebody saw a UFO or a ghost or the werewolf or whatever. That was a
Vampires and so on. Yeah.
yeah, that was a program doing something they weren't supposed to, which being ended up being a thing with some of his men because he remember he had henchmen that because they're from an old version of the Matrix, um, they can't die unless you shoot them with a silver bullet.
Hmm. Yeah. The two that couldn't die without a silver bullet, and then we have the two pale brothers that can basically go into ghost mode. So, what do you think those are
Yeah,
might
yeah,
have conferred?
they're very obviously why people think ghosts exist because they can turn transparent and go through walls and shit. Um, and they did kind of do something like this in the first movie. We didn't mention it because I didn't think about it while we were recording because I didn't have notes like I do this time. But there was the scene where they were going up the stairway in the first movie, and a cat goes by,
Hmm.
and then an identical cat goes by, and Neo says "deja vu," or they're like, "What did you just say?" He goes, "Well, I had some deja vu. A cat went by, and then a cat that looked exactly like it went by again." Or like, was it the same cat? Because that happening was due to like more or less a glitch in the Matrix
Hmm.
that they said happened whenever they changed something. I thought that was interesting that they had a lore reason for why a thing that people experience in real life happens in the Matrix. They're like incorporating all these things about real life that we don't have a proper explanation for that could be explained if we were living inside a machine
Yeah.
that had glitches.
How do you explain a real life glitch? Well,
Well, you see. What did you
just,
think of the Frenchman?
um, I remember back in the day being kind of confused as to what his entire purpose is. Basically, he's just a roadblock to get into the key maker. Um, and honestly, I'm not sure what his actual intended purpose is, other than to go on about cause and effect.
Well, I don't know if they explain it more in the next movie. He's essentially a rogue program. I don't think he was even supposed to be in the Matrix. Like, he was a program that was designed for something else, and he was marked for deletion, and he escaped into the Matrix, which is why he surrounded himself with other programs that aren't supposed to be there, more or less.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm double checking his info online here real quick. Oracle is one of the oldest programs in the Matrix, and he himself states he has survived multiple incarnations of
Yes,
the Matrix,
yeah, he's been there through more than one iteration of the Matrix.
which is also why he has those old programs as bodyguards still.
Yep, and we'll talk about this more later. But he also hints at something that ends up becoming relevant later in the movie. We have no context for it when he says it, but when he's talking to about Neo, he keeps making reference to Neo's predecessors.
Hmm.
At the point in
Which
the
they
movie that that's
which they
happening,
do go a little more
yeah,
into in by the end of the movie. Yep.
yeah, we don't know what he's talking about. Like when the first time somebody watches this movie, they have no idea what he's talking about, and it's a thing they hear. They might just view it as a throwaway line, or like thinking that he doesn't mean there were previous ones. He means there were previous rebels or whatever you want to call them, because you don't really have a reason to think that there was a one before Neo. Doesn't give you any reason to think that. Although they did even in the first movie reference that there had been previous iterations of the Matrix, because Agent Smith mentioned while talking to Morpheus that the original Matrix was designed to be a perfect world, but humans who are imperfect beings like instinctively rejected it. Like the old saying, something that's too good to be true probably is. So when
Mm,
reality seems to be too good, people are like, this can't be real. So it's easy to hypothesize how people would actually react to something like that. You don't know if it would actually work that way in reality, if people ever were in a situation like that. Though I can't
yeah.
really see how you'd have a perfect world considering how many people have differing views to where they never all fucking agree on anything.
Yeah. It just wouldn't happen. Just can't
That's
happen.
probably that they don't explain it, but that's probably what caused it to break down.
Yeah. Well, I think they've explained that a little bit more in the first movie, that that's what happened, is that basically it was too perfect and everyone couldn't believe it, and that's why it broke.
Yeah, like I imagine people that drastically disagree with each other would probably be like, "Wait a minute, how is my life working the way I want it to, but theirs is as well, and we don't have the same ideals." Because it's not like they could really program it. Well, I guess they. I don't know. I don't think they could program thoughts into people's heads.
Or they could also go the route of people who willingly want to commit horrible things and then realizing, wait, no matter how much I do these horrible things, I don't. Nothing horrible seems to be going on. Why is everything not happening? Like maybe like doing some really horrific things out in public, and then nothing happens to them, and they never get arrested or anything. And it's like, wait, what's going on? And that would probably break it for them too. Or
Oh,
maybe not even purposely doing something bad, but then accidentally doing something, and then going, wait, shouldn't something happen about that? And then just again snowballing.
right. And they had the but sorry, I'm looking at my notes here.
Mhm.
So they after they had the meeting with the Merovingian and all that, and it kind of yeah, because we got off topic because I was talking about the previous movie. Um, they went and ended up going into that highway chase or freeway, whatever you want to call it,
Oh, yeah, the freeway.
where because they got the keymaker, and then they got him into a car to escape while they're being chased by the twins, and they had that crazy freeway scene, which I love, or is kind of like another reference to real life, where they're like, "You told us, Morpheus, you told us never to go on the freeway. You said it was suicide. Well, let's pray that I was wrong." Is
Because
there?
yeah, if something goes wrong on a freeway, it can go pretty wrong pretty quickly,
Yeah, and a lot of people
especially at
don't.
that speed.
A lot of people don't like freeways in real life for that specific reason. But the implication in here seems to be that in the Matrix, humans don't use the highway, but like you see a ton of cars there. So I'm thinking like the lore explanation, though they don't say this, must be that programs that have to quickly get from point A to point B are the ones that are actually using the freeway, while most humans are just like, I ain't fucking going down there.
I ain't touched. Mm.
Because the
I'll
implication,
use the off split, smaller freeway over here. I'm not gonna go into that crazy thing. No.
yeah, like the implication is that it is actually dangerous to use the freeway in the Matrix. So obviously, a normal person wouldn't do it because they wouldn't survive.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just a bunch of programs that look like humans. I assume that's why the agents are able to pop up.
And we have some really crazy shit happen on the freeway part section of the movie too, because that's the first time we actually kind of see someone other than Neo beat an agent.
Hmm.
Because while they're defending the Keymaker, there's the whole chase with the twins that ends up leading back and forth, but eventually they end up with Morpheus fighting an agent on top of a semi truck.
And he manages to beat an agent at least enough that they have to find another body, and then they switch with the truck drivers and then purposely crash just in
Yeah,
time for Neo to pop
yeah,
up.
yeah. And I maybe it's just me, but when they show the two agents about to smash the trucks into each other, the kind of look of glee they kind of have, which they don't normally have. When it showed one and then the other immediately, it made me think of that one Dragon Ball Z gif where like Goku's like nodding, and then the camera pans over to Vegeta also nodding. I don't know why that just popped into my head when I saw that right before the trucks crashed together.
Well, for me, since I've actually already seen them, it again reminds me of Mad Max because there's a couple of big trucks in Mad Max that happen, and they're all a bunch of gleeful psychopaths on out there in the post-apocalypse.
Right. And before we really get to
Smash the truck,
yeah,
smash the truck.
before we get to the final thing I want to talk about, which is stuff involving the architect, is there anything specific you want to talk about involving the movie?
Anything specific I want to talk about involving the movie? I mean, again, we've covered the action sequences were pretty good. I do recall like being slightly confused by the Frenchman the first time, but then it's like, oh, this is a whole bunch of innuendo. Okay.
Well,
And looking
yeah,
at it again, it's like, wow, that's really blunt innuendo. I
and
don't know what I was paying attention to.
there's also the fact that if you were watching it without closed caption on, which we were, in case we missed something while one of us was talking, um, the when he actually just randomly speaks French, if you're
It
watching it
still
without,
is French, yeah.
yeah, if you're watching it without closed captions, you might not have realized he said something in French. You might have just thought you didn't understand what he said, which
Yeah, the
could.
subtitles just literally say they start speaking French.
Though I will say this movie in particular uh, has good auto balance, not auto
Oh,
balance, audio
oh,
balance. There's so many movies you watch where there will be scenes where they're talking and you're like, what the fuck are they saying? I can't hear them. Why did the volume go down all of a sudden?
yeah, I think we noticed that almost the first moment in because we had some characters talking quietly, and then a few seconds later we had an explosion, and we weren't deafened by it.
Right, right. Like there were issues I think when we watched the first movie where they were talking too quiet. We're like, well, it's a good thing we got closed captioning on, so we know what they're saying anyhow. But
Hmm.
this movie doesn't have that issue. And the thing is, I will say there are too many movies and TV shows in general that are produced and have that problem. And I think I mentioned this to you off podcast last week that I found out the reason for that is they just assume everybody has surround sound,
Mm.
which makes
Which
no
again is
fucking
ridiculous.
sense.
Yeah. But
And
also, I think that's an issue of older movies too, to be fair. And they
right.
haven't really audio corrected them properly.
So
I got a
eh,
number of them.
after we get through all the shit, the highway chase, they go to get to the source. They do end up running into Agent Smith on the way there, which I think I brought it up where they had to get a special key to get in there. They had to do all this stuff to get past the security protocols. And we're like, wait a minute. They had to cut the power, have this key, be the one um, to get in there. How the fuck did Smith get in there?
And then even more doors are opened up, and it's like, how the hell does he keep getting in here? So that we did see earlier on that an agent got nabbed by him, so it's possible the agents have an in somehow.
Yeah,
Maybe
it
as
would
a
make
way to
sense.
shortcut through back doors and such, maybe.
Well, it would make sense that they'd have access to that area in case something does happen that's not supposed to. They need to be able to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
So he might have actually just been able to steal that information from when he briefly took over an agent before it poofed out to a different body.
Yeah.
Um,
Got a little bit of that info out of it before they could escape him.
because I doubt that if he had the information previously, it would
Although
still be relevant this
actually,
much longer afterwards.
although actually, I do believe we don't see more than two agents after that point of the movie after he grabs the first one.
You know what? You're right.
It just
We
occurred to
never
me. So
see.
I think he does have that agent still, and that must be his way in. They just don't explain it.
Yeah,
We just
they
figured it
don't
out.
explain it. We just yeah, you're right. Is earlier in the movie there were three agents. Then the rest of the
Hmm.
movie there's only two of them at a time. He probably really did eliminate that agent from the Matrix when he assimilated him.
And got all the information out of it too, so he could do all the backdoor tricks.
Man, this is crazy. We're just like deciphering the code while we're in the middle of the podcast.
Right. We're just figuring out the lackluster explanations of the movie as we're going along here.
But I mean that scene was relatively short. It just ended up leading into explaining that was basically there plot wise to kill time while Trinity got into the Matrix and cut the other power source because the people that were supposed to do that got killed by a bomb in the real world, and so
Hmm.
they weren't able to complete their mission. Um, then after that, Neo gets to the architect, or some people like to call him Colonel Sanders. Um,
Got his finger looking good.
and I understand the purpose of this character, but this is definitely a scene that got memed on and made fun of a lot.
Oh yeah.
Both
Even the
because
Oscars next year joked on it.
yeah, both because of the whole seeing all the Neos on all the screens that keep saying random things, but also let's be honest, they use this character as an excuse just to throw a lot of fancy words people don't normally say into the movie.
Yeah. Hmm.
Ergo, concordantly, vis-a-vis,
Yeah.
would you like fries with that? No, I don't want fries with that. Um, and this is where the whole predecessors thing gets brought up. The architect reveals that they're on the sixth iteration of the Matrix, and there's been a one for every previous version of the Matrix. They've even supposedly destroyed Zion before, and it's been rebuilt. Which, like I said, this is something that was. This wasn't really even just them making shit up because they mentioned in the first movie that there were previous versions of the Matrix.
Hmm.
Um,
Not entirely new news. Yes. As a matter
and
of fact, there was apparently a previous. We were aware of at least one previous one because he was destined to be the replacement for the previous one.
yeah.
Yeah.
The main thing this added is the information of how many.
Yeah,
So
expanded it to how many there were.
we had six at this point, and this is
Hmm.
where while he's talking to the architect and he's saying a bunch of fancy words to essentially just say you're doomed, ha ha ha, you're doomed, ha ha ha, uh, without actually laughing because he just straight faces everything.
Yeah.
While that's going on, Trinity's basically dying,
Being chased down by the two agents and then finally gets shot.
and this is the thing where like he gives him the architect gives Neo the option: you can go through this door, reach the source, and save Zion, or you can go through this door and go back to the Matrix because you're a dumb shit. That's basically what he said in more polite words than that, but that was basically what he said to him. Which, you know, how weird would it have been if he just let Trinity die and went through the other door and the series just ended? Like that would have been so anticlimactic and
Yeah, that'd
weird.
be a heck of a downer.
Even though you're basically being told that was what he was supposed to do. Like if he actually did that, it's like it would have made a really terrible story.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, he goes back
Folk,
in.
they're all doomed. Bye.
Instead, he goes back in, flies faster than he's ever flown before, which causes this crazy whirlwind behind him that's picking up cars and shit as he's going. It's an amazing
Look like a
visual.
gosh darn calamari Damacy falling behind him.
Amazing visual, but also just kind of ridiculous at the same time. It's like I'm not
Yeah,
entirely.
well, as it gets more and more extreme, and he's going faster and faster. Yeah,
It's like I'm not entirely sure that was is what would happen if a single being moving that fast was flying through.
I don't think it'd be exact to that, but I'm sure it would definitely do some damage.
And then Neo performs a miracle because and he catches Trinity, who's already been shot, but then he magically reaches into her to pull the bullet out. And then while she's dying anyhow, he's like, "Nah, I'm not gonna let that happen." And reaches into her again and massages her heart back to beating. Which I've also the thing is, it's like even if you could do that, I'm not sure that's how hearts work.
I don't think hearts just work through the brain, but thanks for anyways.
Um, and the thing is, he was performing like Jesus-like miracles here, and I forgot to mention this was earlier in the movie. There was that scene where they first showed up on Zion, and there's just like a huge lineup of people to see him. They're like, "Please, Neo, look after my something or other."
It's just like he's normal like the rest of you. How do you expect him to be everywhere at once to help protect and watch over everybody?
Yeah, that was. But it's like this is gonna come into play in the third movie when we talk about it. But it's like there was a lot of Messiah references here with Neo's
Hmm.
character, where he's basically computer Jesus is the only real way I could think of to describe it. Um, but then we end up finding out what the bunch of the ships got destroyed in an ambush by the or no, they weren't destroyed in an ambush. An EMP fucked them up. They basically got sabotaged
Hmm.
because we find out that Agent Smith, in who had taken over a human and is actually technically in the real world right now, had sabotaged them, which is kind of weird because he's not really on the machine's side anymore.
Yeah, so it's like, whose side is he on really, other than his own side? And it's like, what's his purpose, anyways? Uh,
We find out more about that in the third movie, but that's kind of how it ends on a cliffhanger. It's like, Neo didn't save the day because he chose to save Trinity instead, and a bunch of the ships got wrecked.
And when we still have one of the agents free and a human being in the real world. Dun dun dun.
But overall, I think I still think it's a good movie, mainly because it's just a good action flick, if nothing else. So if you know,
Hmm.
the one thing it does have in common with the third movie is like the ending is probably the least interesting part of the movie because the architect is just
Just
I
everything else in
I
between is a lot more interesting,
I under
than particularly the combat.
I understand he's actually explaining things, but like most of what he says is just word salad.
Yeah. And even Neo calls it out the first time he does his first bit of word salad.
Yeah, he
He
because
just goes,
he asked
"Hey, you didn't explain anything."
he asked him a question and he goes, "You didn't answer my question," and he goes, "Quite right. You
That's
noticed
right.
it.
You're actually more
Yeah, you
more
noticed it.
perceptive than the previous guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
you noticed it faster than the other ones." Which I mean, that admittedly well, probably one of his few good lines, I think.
Mm.
But overall, that bit's the part that I've obviously found the least interesting. Well, that part was more relevant than the fucking Zion dance party, but it just kind of cuts in the middle of the action near the end, and I understand it's there for plot reasons, but it's like the least interesting part of the latter part of the movie.
Hmm. I mean, it's fine to give some answers, but man, did they make it still somewhat dry and hard to watch through.
I would. It's not even really that I'd say it was dry. It's that like it was awkward, which is why I got made fun of so much. Um, but still,
Hmm.
overall, I consider it a good movie. The last good Matrix movie, unless we're counting maybe the Animatrix, but out of
Yeah,
the
a few of
actual.
the animatrix bits were good, but yeah, they're not still like a whole movie, so it's like, eh.
But we're definitely going to have a lot worse things to say
Oh,
about the next movie. Although, actually, one last thing I want to mention.
recap that one. Yeah.
One last thing I want to mention. Actually, no, there's two last things I want to mention. I forgot to mention this earlier. We both noticed this immediately. Tank didn't come back. The character
Oh,
Tank,
yeah.
the
That's right. We want to
operator,
mention that.
the the only guy from the ship that survived, aside from Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus in the first movie, just died off camera
Basically,
because apparently his actor wanted too much money.
his actor wanted more money, which honestly, if he was to come back for a big franchise, he kind of deserved it, but they didn't want to do it, so he gets canned. They hand wave, he dies off screen, and now we got his brother-in-law as a replacement.
Like we don't know the exact figures, so I mean it's possible that he was going to get more money, but he wanted more than that, and must have wanted too much.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be the first time that somebody that was basically a side character acted like that in regards to a movie. I'm not going to talk about other examples because we'll go on for too long
All
if I
all
do.
day. Yeah.
Um, but the other thing is the interesting thing about the Merovingian being introduced in this. Did you ever play the Matrix Online MMO?
Heck no.
So
I've never seen reviews of it and how broken of a buggy mess it was,
right,
so there's no way I was touching up a 10 foot
but
pole.
but but it was supposed to be a pretty big thing when they wanted it to be anyhow. The Merovingian being the Frenchman being introduced was is kind of relevant to that because in the MMO you could actually pick between three different factions who you wanted to side with. You could either side with the humans, the machines, or the Merovingian. Like
Huh.
he was his he was like the third faction, which is kind
Which,
of weird, but also, I mean, he is technically just out for himself. So like, he's not on the machine's side. He's against them, but he's also not like really an ally to the humans. But I guess he wouldn't say no to an efficient human working for him.
True.
This is an interesting little tidbit, which will lead back into something we're going to talk about next time with Matrix Revolutions. Um, I can't think. Is there anything else you think is worth mentioning before we close it out?
Big our tank. Honestly, really good cutscene, really good action scenes, really good music, the memorable music, I should say. By the way, I just had a quick look at that list of the music by accident as I was paging through stuff. Um, Apparently, Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie, and a couple other memorable rockers were actually on the playlist for this one.
Probably in the end credits, which we didn't watch. We didn't watch the
Yeah,
end credits because we actually, for us, we actually started this kind of late, so we didn't want to spend more time watching it than we
um,
needed to. Since we watched the actual movie, we just needed to
Rob
get through and
Zombie,
record the
Rage Against the
podcast.
Machine, Marilyn Manson, and among others. Yeah,
Yeah,
were return ones.
most of the music during the actual movie is by the what was his name? Something wasn't it something Zimmerman?
Uh, Don Davis composed.
Okay. You know what? I'll have to look this up for next time. But I guess that's it. We're more or less done. So
Uh,
we'll see you all next time, everybody, when we talk about Matrix Revolutions. Don't look forward to it.
all I'm gonna say is, oh boy, the only reason I'm looking forward to this is to remember why I hated it so much.
So have a good one, everybody.
And,